we're walking down the road and Prabhupada looks and sees a pig get out of the water and run off. And Prabhupada started laughing. And he said, in New York, you have seen that library on, I think, 42nd Street, New York Public Library. Very big. Prabhupada said, so many books, thousands and thousands of books, Prabhupada said, all about sex. It's kind of funny how Prabhupada would sometimes exaggerate things for effect. And it was brilliant comedy, in a sense. Thousands and thousands of books, all about sex. How to make sex, how to study sex, the psychology of sex, how to have better sex. Prabhupada said, Dr. Freud, philosophy. Prabhupada said, but this hog, he has not read any books, but he can have sex with his mother, with his daughter, with his sister. Oh yes, he can do. And Prabhupada said, that he can make sex better than you. And he has not read any book. So if you want good sex, then you come back as a hog. And he, it was just like a moment of just punching, Another time he was walking down the road in Vrindavan, and he saw camel off in the distance chewing on thorny trees, just like we read about in the Bhagavatam. And Srila Prabhupada looked up, and prior to that, he had been very kind of growly. He was disturbed by some of the things that he considered to have not been yet managed correctly in the build-up to the opening of the Vrindavan temple. So he was pointing these things out, to the different people like Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Dayananda and so on. So I won't go into the details of that, but he was kind of growly, and then he looked up and saw this camel, and immediately he started chuckling. He said, just see, just like our grihastas. And Sri Govinda Prabhu was walking next to Prabhupada, and he said, Srila Prabhupada, remember how Sri Govinda used to wear that white chadar over his head, and just his kind of beak would kind of point out, he's like, had an unusual appearance. And he said, don't you mean the Grihamatis, Srila Prabhupada? And Prabhupada looked, and he's walking with his cane, and he goes, you are talking Grihamatis, I am talking grihastas. So then he stops, and he says, isn't it so much difficulty, so much labor, like the camel? He chews the thorns, he's eating his own blood. Prabhupada said, there's so much labor, so much effort, so much work to have a child. And the wife has to suffer so much. Then labor, then the child comes, so much pain. And then Prabhupada said, and then the man, he has to work so hard, 20-year sentence. And then Prabhupada says, and 1 year later, the wife says, I want another. And Prabhupada says, this is Maya. And then from that, a whole conversation ensued about, well, some men have to get married. Otherwise, you say that all the women should be married, Prabhupada. Yes, that is best. But then some men are going to have to marry. And Prabhupada said, yes. And then he turned and he stopped and he looked right at Sri Govinda and he put his finger up and he said, but when you marry, you must understand you are doing so under the influence of the modes of material nature. With the idea being that it's passion, not compassion, that brings us to this point. And then he said, you understand? And Sri Govinda said, he stared right at Prabhupada like terrified, And he said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada turned and he walked. And as we walked by the camel, Prabhupada just laughed. He just chuckled. So, it was almost like the Bhagavatam coming to life, The verse in the Bhagavatam.